bringing the gospel is the key. That is why we are there. It is not just humanitarian, doing good social work. Our reason for being there is to share the good news of Jesus Christ. We do it through farming methods and working with schools and working with local communities and through the children's home and all these different methods. All of our programming, all of our training is not just integrated with the gospel, but that is the foundation.
And welcome once again to another edition of Footnotes. Pastor Mark here, joined with Pastor Mark, but it's not my double, it's not my bizarro, it's Mark Gwartney from Good Shepherd's Fold, Uganda, Africa. He's our special guest today on Footnotes, and we're looking forward to having a time where we hear about his call to ministry, what they're doing in Uganda so that you can be more connected to a missionary you support here at Broadway, and finally, how missions should impact every believer's life. So, Mark, welcome to Footnotes.
Hey, Mark, it's really good to be here. Thanks for having me on the show, and it's good to be here home at Broadway.
Yeah, so real quick, you were a member at Broadway a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Is that fair to say?
That's a bit fair, yeah. We spent 10 years here in the South Haven area, and Broadway was our home during that time. Our kids grew up here and went to SBC, it was at the time, and North Point now, and so we've got a lot of history here.
Yeah. You worked at that time at NICS, which is the Network of International Christian Schools. And
Yes.
So you were involved in ministry to some degree, being a member here, but something happened in your life around 2007. And that's what I want to start with today. God called you and your dear wife and your family, and you answered that call. So other than just being a former church member at Broadway and being somebody who worked in the NICS office, tell us about your call that changed your life, what happened, what that involved, and where that led you.
Yeah, we did work with NICS for 15 years, served in South Korea, Singapore, and then the 10 years here out of the headquarters. And so we were involved in missions very heavily. We were missionaries, even supported by the church during that time here, and loved what we were doing, loved the ministry. But God just spoke to us during a missions event here at Broadway one day during 2007, early that year. And we started talking about, Amy and I started talking about, well, what is it that God's saying to us? And he had really put orphans and vulnerable children on our hearts. We didn't know exactly what that meant, where that meant, but we responded to the prompting of the Spirit on that missions day and began exploring where might we go? Is God telling us to move somewhere else, to do something different? And so that was sort of the beginnings of it. And as that progressed, we connected with our sending agency, Global Outreach International. It's just down the road in Tupelo, their headquarters, and they introduced us to Good Shepherd's Fold. Said, we can facilitate you going anywhere in the world as God is leading you, but we'd like you to know about this particular ministry that needs some help. And so they introduced us to GSF in Uganda, and that set off a chain of events where we went and visited, just confirmed this is where God's calling us, and eventually moved our family there a year later in May 2008 is when we moved to Uganda.
Now, let's talk just briefly about Good Shepherd's Fold. Somebody may be listening to this and they say, okay, what is that? I heard you say it's in Uganda, which many people are not geographically, I'll confess, the first time you told me where you were at, and this is my ignorance, for some reason I was thinking of the country in South America.
Uruguay.
Another
one that starts with U.
Yes, and so you kept saying Uganda, and my head just went to South America, and I kept saying, oh yeah, the one on the tip, right on South America, Uruguay. And it dawned on me after like halfway through the lunch, because you kept talking about how long it took to get there, and I thought, well, I've been to Peru, and I've been to Bolivia, and I've been to what's the other one? Brazil. And it didn't take that long. I mean, I'm thinking, we got direct flights. I don't know what the problem is. And you were like, no, it's 24 hours. And I just kept thinking, what? And then it dawned on me, wait a minute. He's not saying Uruguay. He's saying Uganda, Africa.
Exactly.
And it just kind of clicked in my head. So I know that if I thought that, somebody might go, Uganda. Where is that? They're Googling, Uganda.
Right.
And then Good Shepherd's Fold, they may say, is that a church? Is that affiliated with a church? What is that?
So starting with Uganda, it's in East Africa, a beautiful place on the equator. Lake Victoria is there, and that's the source of the Nile River. We live about 20 minutes from where the Nile River begins. On the other end, we're all familiar with Nile River and biblical examples in Egypt, and the other end where it begins is in Uganda. They're in East Africa. And there's a little town called Jinja. They're at the source of the Nile, and we live, Good Shepherd's Fold is about 30 minutes from there, from the town of Jinja. Good Shepherd's Fold was started in 1994 as a children's home, and it has grown since then. So we joined, as I mentioned, in 2008, and it has grown to include schools. We have a nursery and primary school, an special education school, an international school on campus at GSF. We do a lot of community development work, so working with partner churches, local community leaders, even schools in the area to build up broken families, to provide food assistance where there is that kind of need, to help people through trauma that they've experienced in their lives, and just all kinds of ways that we reach out in the community around us to share Jesus Christ with the people. Ultimately, that's the goal. But it started as a children's home, and many people who do know the ministry from years back still think of it as a children's home, but it's become much more than that over the 30 years it's been in existence.
Yeah, so you went over there to be the director?
We went to host teams and visitors, interns, church teams, people coming to visit the ministry, and there were other directors in place at that time. So it was about 4 years into our time in Uganda when I was appointed as what we originally called team leader, and now it's called executive director, and I oversee the ministry as a whole.
So you're overseeing quite a bit, schools and community involvement, and like you said, you're working with local churches. Someone may say, well, okay, why a children's home? Well, biblically, I think about the book of James where he says, this is true religion. Minister to widows and orphans. A lot of times we forget that in our proclamation of the gospel. I firmly believe, and I think the other pastors would echo me on this, we love the local church. We firmly believe in planting local churches and seeing that global. But there's also a value to ministries like this. I think about what you're doing. I think about what Tim Lampley is doing down at the Baptist Children's Village in Mississippi. And why do we support those things that aren't local churches? Well, because they're supporting the ministry of the local church, but they're also directly tied into Scripture where James says, widows and orphans, this is true religion. Don't forget this. So, that's key to what you're doing. So, executive director, you minister to kids, I guess, from birth to college?
Up to 18 years old. Really the point of our philosophy at Good Shepherd's Fold is not to keep kids in the home, not to bring them into the home, except for the most dire, the most traumatic situations. And so an illustration of that is when we arrived there were about 100 kids in the home, and now there's only 35. And so we're actually reducing the number of children in the home. Well, that's actually the point, is not to just bring in lots of kids and care for them, much as that moves our hearts and we enjoy those things. But the point is to have children with their families. And so we find ways to keep them with their families, and we find ways to reintegrate them with biological family members wherever that's possible. And so the children in the home are really the most dire, the most traumatic situations that there is either no known family or they just simply are unable to care for them. And so we're doing a lot of things to help rebuild families in the area out of the children's home. But the point is not to just bring in lots of kids and have a child sponsorship program and sponsor all these kids, and run a big ministry in that way. But we're really working with families in the community.
And talk about that. How would a kid be referred to you? Because here in the States, we have a mindset, well, there's all these government programs, and there's social workers, and there's counselors and youth villages, and there's all these things that are created, structured in our society, where if you have a family that has some kind of a need like this, there's multiple venues just
Right.
socially they could go to. Plus, you have things the church has done, like children's villages and things like that, orphanages. So in Uganda, what is the government climate there? I would assume, but I've never been, that it's probably harder there.
Yeah, so in Uganda, there are government mandates and certain things that are laid out, but they are very poorly resourced, and so children are referred to us from the police, from hospitals, from local government people, family members, just all kinds of avenues that they're trying to care in some fashion for this child. However they come to us, our social workers will go and investigate the situation and find out what's the real need, what's the brokenness in this situation, and how can we help. And again, bringing the child into the home is the last resort. We're trying to find ways to help these families apart from doing that. But when it does come to a case that has to come into the children's home, that actually has to be referred by a government social worker. There in Uganda, it's called the probation officer. But probation officers there work with children's welfare at large. It's not sort of the criminal justice system that we think of here in America. So the probation officer, through a judge, has to officially refer a child into an approved children's home. And so that's sort of the format and how we work with government. But again, government, there are schools, there are local programs for things like child protection. There are these social work type of programming that in theory are there. Maybe on paper they are there, but they're completely unresourced or under-resourced. And so we find ourselves doing the investigations that you might think of the government social worker needing to do that. And we find ourselves developing a child protection program and sharing that and training people in the village, whereas it's actually the local government leaders that are mandated to do that by the Ugandan government. They have no resources to do it. So they're thrilled when we come in and say, well, this is something you're supposed to be doing, and we can help you do it. And we can do it from a God-given perspective and a biblical background. And so they are just thrilled to have the help because it's what they're supposed to be doing, but there's no resources allocated to carry it out.
Yeah, so what a great calling you guys have. You're doing so much in that area. That was my point in asking the question, just to get us out of the Western mindset.
Yes.
And to say, think about how much more this ministry can benefit the community and the place where you are, bringing Christ ultimately, right?
Yes,
ultimately
absolutely.
The goal, bringing the gospel. It's not just a social help. It is a help, but it's a help bringing the gospel and hopefully connecting these people to churches where they're served and ministered. And I know your daughter works in youth ministry and works with churches and all
Definitely.
of that.
Bringing the gospel is the key. That is why we are there. It is not just humanitarian, doing good social work. Our reason for being there is to share the good news of Jesus Christ. We do it through farming methods and working with schools and working with local communities and through the children's home and all these different methods. All of our programming, all of our training is not just integrated with the gospel, but that is the foundation for it. And so that's what we teach people. There are certain things, if you'll do these things, it'll bring some change in your life, but the real transformation comes from knowing Jesus Christ and the transformation that he brings through the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, awesome. So you had this call. This is what you're doing in Uganda, Africa, with Good Shepherd's Fold. Now, let's talk a little bit about just how the Lord is using you. I mean, you guys are back on furlough. You're here in the States for this season.
Yes.
One of the things you're going to talk to our church about is just how they can take steps. You took a step, your family took a step to go and be a missionary. How important is that in the local church, missions, and you've sensed that call and done it. So encourage somebody listening who might be a believer that says, I've never thought about that. That's not even on my radar.
Yeah. One of the things we'll encourage tonight, and I would just say to all the listeners here is again, just take a step. You don't have to make the leap overseas in an instant, but maybe explore what are the opportunities. Maybe sign up for a newsletter of a missionary and start following a ministry and find out what they do, and begin praying for someone. Financial support is needed, and Broadway has not only us but multiple missionaries that you can connect with. And so that take a step theme is in line with, we just had something we called GSF Founders Day, a special day in the life of the ministry. It remembers the day that our founder arrived on the field in Uganda. And so that day was just earlier this month, and we were encouraging people, take a step with us, take a step. And so just carrying that on and sort of applying that same kind of theme to people here in South Haven, here in the U.S., like what could I do to open my mind a bit to the things that take place other places in the world, going on a mission trip, going to the interest meeting for a mission trip, like I said, signing up for a newsletter, just anything that starts to change your thinking about just beyond DeSoto County, Mississippi. And so there are a lot of simple little steps that can be done. And it's not to say that if you start doing that you will become a missionary on the foreign field, but God will open up doors and opportunities and relationships from every little step that you take that will just will honestly blow your mind, and you'll see God at work when you're doing it in obedience to Him. Like, what can I do that would help me understand God's heart for the world from right here where I am in South Haven, Mississippi?
We get so myopic, don't we? We think only where I'm at and only my problems. So it's helpful for us to look beyond. Talking about mission trips. So we've been working with you while you've been here, not to date our podcast, but we are working in sometime 2026. We've got dates set in the summer of 2026. We hope to take a trip over to see you guys at Good Shepherd's Fold, to see who we are supporting. You know, one of our strategies with our missionaries is we want to pray for our missionaries publicly. We want to financially support them. We also want to try to visit them and talk just a moment about mission trips. Some people have bad, vibes about mission trips. They say, well, it's just a way for Christians to go on vacation, or it's, what do you really do over there? There's a lot of truth to the what do you do. When I used to lead the mission classes at SBEC, we went globally to many places, but one of the things that we would always teach the students, this is not so much about what you're going to do as what God is going to do through you. Because honestly, if we needed a teacher, it would be easier to hire somebody in their own language. Or if we needed, builders, it would be easier to contract with people on the ground who know what they're doing, XYZ. But, we go because we want to expose you to a bigger picture of God working in the world. Number two, not only do we want to expose you, we want God to work in your heart. He may call you to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. And the Lord may, change your life through this. And yes, you will bring some benefit. It's not to say that you don't, But I think Americans, this has always been my perception as I've taken mission trips. I've been guilty of this myself. We tend to overinflate what we are going to do on this trip. Like we are coming to bring all the aid to you. And it's often quite the reverse to people who go on trip. They change their tune and go, yeah, wow, I'm humbled quite a bit.
Yeah, when going on mission trips, of course, they can be done the wrong way. And, just like anything, you can take any tool that you could name, and there's a right way to use it and a wrong way you can use it. And so we try to be very careful. A lot of the mission teams that we host, we want them to see what God is doing in the ministry, see what's already taking place on the ground. And, one of the most beautiful examples is a quote from someone here at Broadway who came on a team, and she came on a team to visit us several years ago. And she said, while she was there at GSF, she said, "Mark, I follow your ministry. I read all your newsletters. I pray for you every day. I do all these things. We're financial contributors. I'm not just a casual follower. I'm a sincere follower." And she said, "Until I came and saw it with my eyes," she said, "I had no idea. I just had no idea what all takes place here in the ministry. And yet I followed it from afar." And so that's the impact of coming in person, is like, oh, now I see with my eyes. And the things that I read in the newsletters and the brochures and the emails, they just make so much more sense now. And so that is particularly helpful for a sending church visiting its missionaries on the field. But it's something that also, even if it's not that type of relationship on a mission trip, that having your eyes opened, it's again just taking a step to understand, so that when you hear something on the news about Uganda, your ears perk up and say, oh, I'm interested because I've been there, because I know people there. And so we start weaving our relationships together with other people in other parts of the world. And that does something to our hearts, so that I'm not just focused on my life right here where I live, but as your heart opens up to other people of the world, your heart will start to open up toward the person over at the local restaurant where you stop and grab lunch, whether it's a customer or the person behind the counter, and you start finding your heart changed by having taken these steps and opened your heart to maybe someone on the other side of the world. And so there is tremendous value of going on a mission trip, going to see how God is at work. And that really is a big part. We think of doing, like you said, but seeing how God is at work, like, wow, I didn't know that God worked like this all around the world. And sometimes it humbles us and puts us to shame about, he could be working like that where I live, and I'd like to see that. So lots and lots of benefits when a mission trip is coming alongside the missionaries and the work that's already taking place, and just allowing God to open your heart. Take that step.
Yeah, maybe we would compare it, because again, there's always detractors, and they'll say, well, I mean, we should serve God here. We don't have to go overseas.
Yes.
That's true.
You should.
You should, but do you? And sometimes it takes going somewhere else, getting a new perspective to get you to do that. It would be like saying this, well, we don't need to go anywhere on vacation. We can just stay here.
Right.
And rest.
Right.
Well, you can rest in your house, but isn't it good to get away from the familiar surroundings and the constant things that you deal with? And when you step away, there is just such strength and invigoration and power, and you come back and you say, okay, I can do this. I can do this. Well, it would be the same way with missions. Sure, you can do missions across the street. You should. But is there value in you stepping out and seeing God working globally? And I think that there is. You see that This is not just a religion where I live in the South. It's not just a particular group's religion. This is a global mission.
The thought that comes to mind is when Jesus was having a little debate with some of the Pharisees, and basically told them, you are keeping the law, you're tithing, and in the agricultural societies. He mentions some of the things that they grow in their fields, dill and cumin and things like that. But he says, you're tithing, you're doing this thing, but you are neglecting the greater things of love and compassion and kindness. And so it's those kind of ways. Like, yes, you should be working for the local church and doing the work of the ministry here where you are. But there are other things that would open up your mind even more, that would just, again, open your mind and heart to, in a way that that will change the way that you act locally as well. And God is saying, hey, there are things that you can do that would go far beyond just the tithe that you give in your church. He didn't say stop doing it or do these other things instead of that. He just said, you're doing those things. Yes, that's good, but don't neglect these greater things about the heart of God for the whole world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. So if someone said, okay, well, what could I do if I can't go? How can I encourage missionaries like you? So our church obviously adopts missionaries. We do this intentionally, and we do this in a great sense for protection. There's all kinds of agencies and all kinds of people, but hopefully you trust your church, your local church, to say somebody has known these people and vetted these people and stays in touch with these people. So when we have missionaries adopted by our church, sent by our church, we trust them, right? We trust them because we know there's all kinds of fraud and things globally, all over the world, all kinds of accusations in all kinds of areas. So that's one benefit of a church adopting a missionary. Two, it keeps certain missionaries in front of you, so that you have a personal relationship with them. They're not just some organization, Lottie Moon, or IMB. Those are great, but they're just nameless, faceless organizations to most church members. But when we have adopted missionaries, okay, I know who these people are. They're vetted by my church. They're trusted. Now, how can I minister to them? And let me also just add one thing that a listener may not know about our church. We have a lot of people that have come out of Broadway historically that have gone into missions. So most of our missionaries are from this church, which I think is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
A lot of churches cannot point to that. My church growing up, we had one or two families that went to the mission field over the course of this church's life. When I was there, and they were celebrated. They were a big deal. We went to go visit them because they were from us. They had gone to Bolivia. That was a very big deal, for us. In the same way, I look at the people that have come out of Broadway. That's a big deal. You're our family. I mean, the Gwartneys came from here. Josh Manley is from here.
You got Aaron and Tiffany Epps that were here.
The Epps that are in Brazil, yes, and the Manleys that are in Dubai, and then you guys in Uganda, Lori McTeer, who is with On the Go in Nashville.
Right.
There's another one we won't name because they're in a hard place with the IMB, but they're from here. And I think, man, look, we've got 5-6 missionaries. Well, really most of our missionaries came out of Broadway. There's a connection. So that's exciting to us. And, my prayer is that we would see more members take that call. And I think the reason why so many did that, Brother Bobby emphasized missions quite a bit.
Yes,
Don't
he
you
did.
think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was part of our journey, just being here and hearing the mission story. Of course, we were missionaries. We were serving with Network of International Christian Schools, but hearing how God is at work around the world, that's beautiful to have those opportunities.
Yeah. So ways that members can support you, we try to, give your information out on our Member Connection Facebook page. So you're there. Anybody could message you or write to you via social media. You're also prayed about here. You're here, right? So like you said, we're doing a missions banquet one night gathering tonight. We have you speaking. I mean, I think that's significant. these are opportunities for people to be exposed, to pray better, to learn about the ministry. So, yeah, absolutely. Real quick, you mentioned a lot of things that you're doing at Good Shepherd's Fold right now in the ministry. What are the biggest things that you guys are doing, that you're seeing God do in your ministry?
Well, in a nutshell, I could say, again, GSF has been there for 30 years. And so out of 30 years of ministry, we have discovered a lot of things that work and a lot of things that don't work, and have refined these things. And so when I refer to the trainings that we do or the programs that we have, those are things that have proven to be highly impactful, and we are taking those things that have been developed over all those years at GSF and taking them into the community. And so the transformation we've seen at our local schools, nursery, primary school, special education, we're actually partnering with other local schools in the area and say there's training that we can offer you that will help move your school forward to become an authentic Christian school. There are things that you can do in your garden through Farming God's Way that would implement things that will transform your garden itself. But again, the goal is much more than the garden itself and the yield that you get out of that garden. There are things that can transform your family. Do you see beautiful things happening at GSF? We want those beautiful things to happen in your family, in your community. And so we have programs and training and teaching. We're taking all these things out into the communities around us in all these different realms. And we're having an opportunity, really a strategic plan to reach our whole district, which would be our district would be roughly like the size of a county, like DeSoto County, or maybe a couple of counties around, to say we're going to reach our entire district in this way. And people are yearning for it. People are craving for it. They just don't have access to the opportunities. You know, you move around DeSoto County. How many churches are there in DeSoto County? It's more than we can number. And there are churches that just have not been trained. They don't have access to that kind of solid foundation. And so when we come alongside people who are trying with what they have and say, we can help you move forward, then that's a beautiful thing, whether it's a church, a school, a family, a community, a farmer, all those different avenues.
Awesome. Now, last kind of thought. So when you did accept the call of God, how hard was that on your family to transition?
Wow. We talked to our kids. Our kids were young at the time. They were 5 and 8 and 11 years old when we moved to Uganda. So, a year prior to that, when we were talking to them, we wanted our children to be on board with this. We're mom and dad, and there's going to be certain decisions that are going to be made, but this is going to be a family affair. And so we talked to our children about it. And when it became clear, like I said, we started taking some steps like, oh, God's telling us something. We didn't know what country yet that it was. We didn't know the ministry, but we started pursuing those things like, okay, we'll do the research. We'll ask some questions. We were introduced to people, and we're talking to our children. And along the way, it became clear very quickly, because we were intentionally asking some of those questions very quickly, that God intended for us to go to Good Shepherd's Fold. But the kids were on board with it. Our family was on board. But I'll add this, Mark. The hardest year, Amy and I have been married 30 years. The hardest year of our marriage was the 6 months before we moved and the first 6 months on the field. That 12-month period was very difficult on our marriage and on our family relationships, even though we were pursuing. Or maybe I'd say because we were pursuing. We were putting ourselves out there at that point. And, the enemy works against that and didn't want to see those things happening. And so he started trying to pull our family apart. But through all those things, by God's grace, our family stayed together, our marriage stayed together. And as we persevered and found help through those things, God has been gracious all along to keep our family strong and growing and thriving. It's not always been easy, but he took us through the steps to get there, and he's taken us through with his grace to stay there.
That's good news. Well, we look forward to hearing from you, and we also look forward, Lord willing, a year and few months from now taking a team to Uganda to see what
Yes.
God is doing.
We are looking
So,
forward to
yeah.
hopefully June 2026.
That's
is
right.
What we're
June
narrowing down.
18 through June 30th, roughly somewhere in there is our dates, and don't hold us to that, but that would all depend on the airline.
We're zeroing
But,
in
yeah,
on those dates.
we're zeroing in, and we're looking forward to getting a team together and seeing what God will do. Well, brother, thank you for being on Footnotes. Thank you for taking time to talk to us. Our hope is that our members get to know you in a better way. You know, there's a lot that know you, but then there's a lot that have come along since you left,
Yes.
and they don't know you. I think we forget that sometimes. We need to be reminded. We have new people who go now, who are the Gwartneys? And hopefully an episode like this helps them get to know your calling and what you're doing in a better way. So thank you, brother.
Thanks for letting us be here today, Mark, and we're grateful for the opportunities here.
Amen. And that's another edition of Footnotes.